Well, hey, my beautiful people. How are you? Um, I decided to do another chapter today. So let's go ahead and continue with chapter 7. Um, all right, so chapter 7 in the book of Genesis talks about how God destroys the world with a flood. So chapter 6 was basically the introduction to Noah and talking about Noah. And now we're talking about the final preparations of Noah for the flood. All right, so, excuse me. Chapter 7, verse 1 talks about how God invites Noah into the ark. And verse 1 says, "And the Lord said unto Noah, Come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation." So, when he talks about coming into the ark, sorry, I just ate, so I feel like I got a frog in my throat now. God was in the ark, and basically that's what it's saying. It says, come into the ark. So, if you think about it, God was in the ark with him and would be with Noah in the ark. So he called Noah to come into the ark with him. And when it says, I have seen that you are righteous. So we got to think that, Noah spent the years before the flood in active obedience. He not only believed that God would send the flood, but he obeyed what God told him to do in preparation for it. So that is a big step in, obedience for Noah. All right, so the next verse is verse 2 through 9. And that talks about how Noah gathers all the animals and his families. So verse 2 through 9 says, "Of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens, the male and his female, and of beasts that are not clean by two, the male and his female. Of fowls also of the air by sevens, the male and the female, to keep seed alive upon the face of all the earth. For yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And every living substance that I have made will I destroy from off the face of the earth. And Noah did according unto all that the Lord commanded him. And Noah was 600 years old when the flood of the waters was upon the earth. And Noah went in, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him into the ark because of the waters of the flood, of clean beasts and of beasts that are not clean, and of fowls and of everything that creepeth upon the earth. There went in 2 and 2 unto Noah into the ark, the male and the female, as God had commanded Noah." So in verse 2, where it talks about you shall take with you. You can also refer to Genesis skip a little bit further, or actually in the last chapter, Genesis chapter 6, verse 20. God said the animals would come to Noah by migration. Divine power alone could have made this happen. 2 by 2, they went into the ark. Well, God never had problems with the animals. Only man is more stupid than the animals. And that's Isaiah chapter 1, verse 3. God never had problems with any of the animals. They obeyed him, and he took care of them. But only man is more stupid than animals because man went wicked. And thanks to Noah for his obedience, he was able to replenish, him and his kids were able to replenish the earth, and so on and so forth. Excuse me. All right, verse 10 through 12. And verse 10 through 12, God brings the water upon the earth. So 10 through 12 says, "And it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the flood were upon the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broke up, and the windows of heaven were opened, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights." Can you imagine? So in verse 10, after 7 days, the water was upon the earth. So Noah, the animals, and his family had to wait in the ark 7 days for the rain to come. This was a real test of faith to wait in the ark for a week after more than 100 years of preparation. So I did have it down because I wasn't for sure how long it took. But now we know 100 years of preparation. That's a lot. And in verse 11, the windows of heaven were opened. So this is when the heavens containing the great waters that were above the firmament that is talked in Genesis chapter 1 verse 7 opened up. It caused a huge blanket of water in the upper part of the atmosphere. And where it says the fountains of the great deep that were broken up. So water also came up from under the earth as well. No doubt accompanied by a great geological catastrophe. And in verse 12, when it talks about 40 days and 40 nights, the number 40 comes with being associated with testing and purification, especially before entering into something new and significant. 40 is an important number because God was tested for 40 days and 40 nights. 40 is also seen in Moses' time on Mount Sinai, and that's in Exodus 24 verse 18 and Deuteronomy chapter 9 verse 25. 40 is also seen in the spies' trip to Canaan, and that's in Numbers chapter 13 verse 25. 40 is also seen in the Israel's times in the wilderness, and that's in Numbers chapter 14 verse 33 and chapter 32 verse 13. 40 is also seen in Elijah's miraculous journey to Sinai, and that's in 1 Kings chapter 19 verse 8. And 40 is also seen in Jesus's temptation in the wilderness. That's also, you can reference that in the book of Mark chapter 1 verse 13. All right, so on to verse 13 through 16. Verse 13 through 16 is about talks about they all enter the ark and the doors shut. 16, okay. In the same day enter Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his son with them into the ark. They and every beast after his kind, and all the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and every fowl after his kind, every bird of every sort. And they went in unto Noah into the ark, 2 and 2 of all flesh, wherein is the breath of life. And they that went in male and female, of all flesh, as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in. So in verse 16, when it says, went in as God had commanded. So this right here describes how everything was fulfilled exactly as the Lord had spoken. And the Lord shut him in. Noah did not have to shut the door on anyone's salvation, but God did it. After the same pattern, it is never our job to disqualify people from salvation. If the door is to be shut, let God shut the door. Don't be the one to shut the salvation out of their life. Only God can do that. And that's also referenced in Revelation chapter 3, verse 7. All right, on to verse 17 through 23. And this talks about Noah in the ark during the flood, and the flood is described. So 17 and 23. And the flood was 40 days upon the earth, and the waters increased and bare up the ark, and it was lift up above the earth. And the waters prevailed and were increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark went upon the face of the waters. And the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered. 15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. And all flesh died that moved upon the earth, both of fowl and of cattle, and of beast, and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, and every man. All in whose nostrils was the breath of life, and all that was in the dry land died. And every living substance was destroyed which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle, and the creeping things, and the fowl of the heaven and the earth, they were destroyed from heaven. And Noah only remained alive, and they that were with him in the ark. So verse 18, when it says the waters prevailed and greatly increased on earth. So this description is so complete and very specific, okay? This is the description of a global catastrophe. It also, you can reference that in Psalms 104, verse 5 through 9, and 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 5 and 6. And in verse 20, when it talks, and the mountains were covered. So if you think about the highest mountain on this earth, okay, this took so much waters. He had waters coming from heaven. He had waters coming up from the earth. And that is, and for 40 days and 40 nights it did that. That is insane amounts of water. You know, it's hard to comprehend. Today, the waters are collected into oceans, what we know as oceans. The oceans could cover the land to a depth of 2.5 to 3 miles deep. And in verse 22, when it says, all in whose nostrils was the breath of the spirit of life, all that was on the dry land died. So there was a question asked, how fish drowned in the flood. So from what I've researched, it says it talks about the breath of the spirit of life. So my assumption, and this is my assumption, that the fish did not die in the flood, only animals. And with the breath of life in them died. I'm assuming the animals on dry land. Because God did just as he said. Now, I could be completely wrong. I don't know about the fish. But it did say all of them, you know, on dry land. So I'm assuming that's fish is not included, and all the animals, or the fish and the whales and everything that's in the ocean and the seas remained alive. And the last verse of this chapter is verse 24. And this talks about how the flood lasted 150 days without receding. And it says in verse 24, and the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days. My question is 150 days. So did God put the animals that were on the ark in hibernation? Talking about the animals. But then again, I thought, well, if they do that, they couldn't eat. But then God would sustain them, of course. So, but it also talked about how they collected food and everything else. So for the animals. So I'm, I don't know. That's another good question. We don't really know, but we can only assume. I'm sure Noah and the family tended to every animal, and God made sure that the animals would not harm a hair on their head. But that leaves me one other question. Was there dinosaurs? Like, where did they... Was it way before Noah's time? So, I don't know. I've always wondered about dinosaurs. Like, where did they come from? It says the beasts. What kind of beast is he talking about? So, I don't know. It's always puzzled me, but it interests me because, even though God says we're not meant to know everything, I think, we can only interpret and use our best guess and go from there on certain things. Not everything, but certain things. All right, well, thank you for staying with me through chapter 7. Have a good evening.